announce the annual 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War Commemorative Partner Program Lecture Series. Please rise and remain standing for the singing of the National Anthem and the Invocation. The National Anthem is being sung today by ANC Band vocalist Staff Sergeant Richard Scholar.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Thank you, Staff Sergeant Scholar. Ladies and gentlemen, given the invocation today is Chaplain and Colonel James Henderson, U.S. Army retired, 26-year Army veteran, Vietnam veteran, Colonel Henderson.
Thank you, Sergeant Major Perry. Good morning, everyone. Let us pray. Father, we thank you for this special day as we come together again to observe the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War. Lord, we pray that this will be a time of happy remembrance, a time of healing, as we remember the best. Lord, help us to set aside the worst. Let us give honor today to all those for whom honor is due, to never forget those who gave their lives, are wounded, those who suffer today, their families as well. Help us to forgive and go forward with your blessings. We pray your blessings on this special celebration as we continue in our commitment to serve our nation. Thank you for the rights you gave us for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and the duty and the privilege we have to defend them. Thank you for all of our armed forces, our veterans past, present, and our families. May your blessings be upon them and upon everyone here today. God bless the United States. God bless all who have served and those who serve today, and family members as well. Most of all, help each one of us to be and to become the people you called us to be, and to accomplish all the purposes that you have for each of us in our lives, the purposes for which you created us. Through you, we know the best is yet to come. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen. Please be seated.
Thank you, Chaplain Henderson. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is John Perry, Command Sergeant Major retired. I'm a Vietnam era veteran. It is an honor for me to be here today as we host the 4th annual 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War Lecture Series. Today we are honored to have Command Sergeant Major Jimmy Spencer, a Vietnam veteran, and Special Forces Command Sergeant Major as guest speaker. But before Command Sergeant Major Spencer speaks, we have a couple of important awards, recognition, and a special announcement before continuing with our main program. The Outstanding Civilian Service Medal is awarded to private citizens, including civilians not employed by the Army or an Army contractor. It is the third highest award that the Department of the Army can bestow upon a civilian. The criteria for the award are that the Secretary of the Army or another major commander may bestow this award for outstanding service to an individual that makes a substantial contribution or is significant to the command concerned. If Miss Janet Marino would please come forward at this time, we would like to recognize her by presenting her with the Department of the Army's Outstanding Civilian Service Medal. On behalf of Honorable Eric Fanning, the Secretary of the Army, General Dennis L. Vide, the Commanding General of the Army Interior Command, presenting the medal today will be Dr. Joseph Fitzgerald, Civilian Aide to the Secretary of the Army. In the military, we have a tradition for standing at attention when orders are read. Please stand for the reading of the order. Attention to orders. Headquarters, Department of the Army, Washington, D.C., November 2016. Department of the Army's Outstanding Civilian Service Award and Medal is presented to Janet Kirby Marino for outstanding public service supporting soldiers, civilians, and their families within the Redstone Arsenal community from January 2010 to September 2016. Ms. Marino volunteered her time and effort to support many Army family programs and events that honor and support the U.S. Army, and she continues to ensure military family members of the Redstone Arsenal community are welcomed with open arms. Her leadership and compassion as a civilian volunteer enhance the traditions of the Army service and adding to the quality of Army community and organization events and programs in the Tennessee Valley. Ms. Marino's dedication to spirit of volunteerism are in keeping with the highest traditions of selfless service and reflect great credit upon herself, the United States Army Materiel Command, and the Department of the Army. Signed, Dennis L. Vide, General, United States Army Commanding. Please be seated. I'd like to ask Captain Mike Rose and Command Sergeant Major Jimmy Spencer, our guest speaker, to please join me on stage. The Medal of Honor Award for Captain Mike Rose has been approved by Congress and is awaiting signature by the President of the United States. Captain Rose exhibited extreme courage as a medic over 46 years ago, taking care of 50 wounded soldiers during fierce fighting in Laos. You can Google Mike Rose's name and read about his story. At this time, Command Sergeant Major Spencer, an official representative of the Command Department program, will present Captain Rose with the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War lapel pin and a 50th anniversary horn. I'd like to invite Major General Rogers of Lockheed Martin, this year's lecture series sponsor, and Mr. Son Nugent, And W Officer 4, retired Warren Harmon, President of the Vietnam Veterans of America, Chapter 1067, to join me on stage. Son Nguyen was a former second lieutenant in the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, 65th Construction Engineer Battalion in 1970. After the fall of South Vietnam, Vietnamese communists jailed him for 3 years. After being released from re-education camp, he was sent to a labor camp for more than a year before he was able to find a way to escape. He was captured by the Vietnamese communists again. Fortunately, he was successful in gaining his freedom. Finally arriving in the United States, he attended and graduated from Marquette University in Milwaukee with a double-E degree in 1987 in electrical engineering. He has been working for the U.S. Army since and was part of the BRAC coming down from St. Louis to Redstone Arsenal.
I just want to briefly tell you that Son found us. We didn't find him. He actually joined the Vietnam Veterans of America as a lifetime associate member when he got to the United States because he didn't have any friends, and so he wanted to be around Vietnam veterans because he had fought with them for all those years. And so when we formed our chapter in 2012, he came to us and he transferred to our chapter and has been there ever since. And he's a great individual, and I can't believe he's got an engineering degree and works out on the arsenal. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, people say that we have only one life to live, but for me, I think I have two lives. Yeah, after the fall of South Vietnam, I think that my first life ended. Then, because you may know or you may not know that here's what the policy, the new government, the communists applied to us. Here's the Mr. Prime Minister of the Prime Minister of Vietnam Communist saying announced in Saigon on January 20th, 1976. Here's what he said: to liberate the South Vietnam, we have the right to confiscate their, they mean South Vietnamese men, women in military and the government. So to liberate the South Vietnam, we have the right to confiscate their property, manufacturers, and farmlands. We have the right to drive their car, using their wives, turning their children into slaves, and sending them to new economic zone where they have to face many illness, disease, and toxic water, and eventually they will die. That's the policy the new government applied to us. That's why I mean that my first life ended. Luckily that when we after a few years in prison, and Labor Day, labor camp, we found a way to escape. And when we come to the United States, I think that I was reborn, and I have a new second life in America. And for now, for 26 years, look back, I am very appreciative of what America gives us. That's why I want to present this flag, this official flag, with the color yellow. Traditional, the color, yellow color just have the king and queen is allowed to have it, and the yellow color is the flag which have represent for Vietnam for 2,000 or 3,000 years. When the China dominate Vietnam in about 1,000 years, and we had 14 times or more to fight again and kick them out of Vietnam. Then we all use the flag, even though it changed the decoration, but this flag is a represent for our native. Then that's why in appreciation for the U.S., I would like to represent it to General Roger as in appreciation for my very good second life. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, earlier we had Chaplain Ney up here, and I just wanted to touch on something for those who were not in the room. When service members go off to war, it becomes a life-changing experience. Their lives are changed in ways that it's hard to explain and harder to understand for the loved ones back home. Recently, I was reading a book entitled War and the Soul, a book on PTSD. The book was written to help understand what many of our soldiers experience, but few talk about. The life-threatening situations many of our soldiers have said they experienced as a separation of body and soul. In a recent gathering of people who worked on this program, this topic was discussed. Those involved in discussion expressed experiencing just such a thing. Chaplain Ney was involved in that discussion, and he listened as they spoke. He offered to be here today to help with the healing process. So, ladies and gentlemen, Chaplain Ney, are you up in the audience? Chaplain Ney is to my right. After the main event, Chaplain Ney has a chaplain's corner over in the USO canteen. Please stop by and thank him for what he's doing. So, Chaplain Ney, thank you for everything that you do. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, I'd like to continue with the program and recognize the Vietnam War and Vietnam era veterans, their spouses, and all veterans. We would like to take this moment to recognize our military heroes for whom we owe our freedom. Please stand when I call out the period of time when you were in uniform. The Vietnam War era is designated as the time between the years of November 1955 and May of 1975. If you served in any branch of the military between 1955 and 1975, or supported the Vietnam program prior to that time, please stand. Thank you. Very positive group. Thank you for serving. If you served in any branch of the armed forces prior to 1955 in the Korean War or World War II, please stand. Thank you. Thank you. We don't have many World War II veterans left. If you served in the armed forces after 1975, the Gulf War, Afghanistan War, Iraq, or other locations, please stand. Thank you. The 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War Lecture Series Committee is truly honored and humbled by the presence of so many Huntsville, Madison County, and Redstone Arsenal leadership present today. We welcome and thank our elected officials, our Team Redstone officials, senior leadership, our community leaders, and all of our retired military and NCOs who have joined us today. Thank you for being here to help us honor our Vietnam War and Vietnam-era veterans. Today's VIPs are our Vietnam War veterans. They are here with us today to be recognized and thanked. Welcome home. To our Vietnam veterans, it is because of your commitment to our nation 50 years ago that today's soldiers, sailors, airmen, Coast Guard, and Marines are welcomed home as heroes. We are here today to honor your generation who has given so much and received so little. That makes the heroes for today's lecture. You are the heroes for today's lecture series. Thank you. I would like to welcome Command Sergeant Major Retired Jimmy Spencer, a Vietnam veteran, and our guest speaker. Thank you for accepting our invitation, sir, to be this year's guest speaker. And also a huge thank you to this year's corporate sponsor, Lockheed Martin, Major General Retired Jim Rogers. Thank you, sir, very much for all the Lockheed Martin support and during the planning and the execution of this event. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to direct your attention to your right, my left. Please stand for the reading of the Missing Man Table. America's white table represents every branch of the military and is meant to be a universal sign of brotherhood for all those missing in action and prisoners of war. As a symbol of missing and captive service members, the table we now know as the Remembrance Table, the Missing Man Table, the POW-MIA table, and the White Table originated during the time of the Vietnam War when a group known as the Red River Valley Fighter Pilots Association, or the River Rats, set the first Remembrance Table. Following the Vietnam War, the Remembrance Table ceremony spread and made its way into military dining in and dining out ceremonies. The table that stands before you is a place of honor. In setting this table, we here acknowledge those in prison and those missing from our ceremony today. We will remember them. The table is small and is set for one, symbolizing the vulnerability of a lone prisoner against captives. The tablecloth is white, symbolizing purity of intention and motives in responding to the nation's call to arms, and when answering the call to duty. The single red rose displayed in the vase reminds us of the life of each of the missing and the loved ones and friends of those Americans who keep the faith, awaiting answers and awaiting their return. The vase is tied with a yellow ribbon, symbolizing the power that ties, that binds us to one another in love and faithfulness. It tells the world that we are remembering someone, symbolizing our continued determination to account for our missing. The candle, set a-burning, symbolizes the burning hope that lives in our hearts and casts light into the darkness to illuminate their way home, away from their captors, to the open arms of loved ones and grateful nation. the slice of lemon. The plate is set, but will not be used. Upon the plate is a slice of lemon. The lemon reminds us of the bitter fate of those captured and missing. The grains of salt. The salt reminds us of the countless tears shed by those captive and missing, and by their families who seek answers. The wine glass. The wine glass is inverted. They cannot toast with us today. The chair is empty, for they are not here. The missing, the captive, and the fallen are not present. The Bible represents the strength gained through faith to sustain those lost from our country. Remember all who have served alongside them, who have donned the same proud uniform, being sworn to the same faith and allegiance. We will never forget their sacrifice. To America's POWs and MIAs, you are not forgotten so long as there is one left in whom your memory remains. Until the day they come home, we will remember. The empty place represents Americans still missing from each of the 5 services: Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, Coast Guard, and civilians. This honors ceremony symbolizes that they are with us here in spirit. I would like to ask you to please join me in a moment of silent prayer. Thank you. Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, at the beginning of the program, I welcomed everyone to the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War Commemorative Partner Program Lecture Series. I want to take a minute to explain what this program is about. The Department of Defense Vietnam War Commemoration has initiated the Commemorative Partner Program to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War. The Commemorative Partner Program is designated for veteran and non-veteran organizations to assist a grateful nation in thanking and honoring our Vietnam veterans and their families. Commemorative partners are encouraged to participate in the commemoration of the Vietnam War by planning and conducting 2 events or activities per year for 11 years, as that was the duration of the war. More information about how to become a Commemorative Partner member can be found at our table to the right. And we do have representatives of the Commemorative Partner Program here today. Ladies and gentlemen, here in North Alabama area for this program, several of these partners joined together and agreed to host this lecture series to recognize our veterans and share their experiences from all services and all phases of the war. We can find a list of those supporting organizations in your program. The lecture series features local Vietnam veteran guest speakers and memorabilia displays. The purpose of this event is not only to recognize the contribution and sacrifices made by our North Alabama veterans, but also to help educate our young people about the Vietnam War. Our event today would not have been possible if not for the help of many volunteers and our sponsor, Lockheed Martin. With Major General Jim Rogers, Colonel Retired Grady King, and Miss Connie Cakespoke, please join me on stage. Ladies and gentlemen, I will be presenting each with a challenge coin for their support in this year's 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War Lecture Series. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time I'd like to ask Major General Jim Rogers to join me at the podium for a special presentation. Well, over here. On behalf of the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War Lecture Series Committee, I would like to present you with a special coin to commemorate Lockheed Martin's sponsorship of this year's 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War Lecture Series. Ladies and gentlemen, Major General Jim Rogers.
If you know, it's John, it's just like a sergeant major. I've had sergeant majors tell me where to go in so many places. I couldn't. When I was in, I always used to say, what a great day to be a soldier. In this case, what a great day to be a soldier for life. That's the new mantra that we believe every soldier should abide by. We'll never, ever stop being a soldier, whether you're in for a day or in for 40 years. So this is a great event. I got to recognize at the time Sergeant Rhodes, he is waiting for the NDAA, the Defense Appropriation Bill, to get through, the President to sign. But you need to go online and read the accounts of his, the reason he is a recipient of the Medal of Honor. He deserved it that many years ago. So, sir, thank you very much for what you've done and what you continue to do for this country. We sponsored this at Lockheed, but Command Sergeant Major retired John Perry was the one that put all this together and has been. So, John, I appreciate all you do for this community and for the Vietnam veterans. Thank you very much. And it could not be done without Liz Knudsen. So, Liz, thank you very much. We saw Grady King and Connie up here, Connie Casewell, but all these young Americans in the vintage uniforms, we call them vintage, sorry, actually I wore some of those. It's great to see young Americans helping out for a service that has done so much, all the services. So thank you very much. So I get the honor of introducing our guest speaker. And so as I read through his bio and I got to the 10th page, I said, okay, I gotta cut this down. So bear with me here. No, actually, Well, you'll see what happens here. Command Sergeant Major Jimmy Spencer, a native of Mobile, Alabama, so right here, enlisted in the U.S. Army in December of 1961. The following month, he began his military career in Fort Chaffee, Arkansas. During his 32 years of active military service, Command Sergeant Major Spencer has had a variety of assignments from conventional forces, special forces, and ranger units. So I'm actually not going to list all the places he served because it would be every base that anyone's ever heard of. But I want to tell you about his awards because they tell the story of Command Sergeant Major Spencer. Command Sergeant Major Spencer is a graduate of both the U.S. Army and the Republic of Korea Ranger Schools and the Canadian Airborne School. His awards and decorations include the Legion of Merit with 1 Oak Leaf Cluster, Bronze Star with 1 Oak Leaf Cluster, the Purple Heart, Meritorious Service Medal with 3 Oak Leaf Clusters, the Army Commendation Medal with 1 Oak Leaf Cluster, the Air Medal, the Vietnam Honor Medal, the Republic of Vietnam Cross of Gallantry with Palm, Combat and Expert Infantryman's Badge, Master Parachutist, Scuba, Pathfinder, Jungle Expert Badges, Ranger, and Special Forces tabs. He's got Canadian, Spanish, Ecuadorian, and Republic of Korea parachutist badges. Now, when I read that to my wife, she goes, "Oh, he's a jump hog." You have to be in 80 seconds on that. So. Command Sergeant Major Spencer retired from the United States Army in August of 1993 to assume the position of Director of Non-Commissioned Officer and Soldier Programs for the Association of the United States Army. So he went right from service to service in the United States Army. He retired from AUSA in May of 2013 and currently serving as the consultant with the Department of Defense commemoration for the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War Commission and is a senior fellow with the AUSA Institute for Land Warfare. He is a member of the Board of Directors of the Army's Historical Foundation, the Association of the Special Operations Professionals, and is an active member of the Washington, D.C. Civil War Roundtable. Now, to be clear, I don't think he served during that time, but he's on the roundtable. He's a past member of the Board of Directors for the Armed Forces Retirement Home Foundation, the Armed Forces Service Corporation, and the Army and Air Force Mutual Aid Association. And he frequently serves as a senior mentor for the Pre-Command and Command Sergeants Major Designee course that's held at the Center for Army Leadership at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. He's married to the lovely wife Susan, and they have 2 children, Melissa and Michelle, and 5 grandchildren. Command Sergeant Major retired Spencer is a soldier for life. Please help me welcome this great soldier and this great American.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I think this is the first standing ovation that I've ever had. And I think it's only fitting that it comes before my remarks, not after. I am delighted to be here with you. I very much appreciate John and all you folks allowing me to come here and spend some time with you. I really wanted to bring my wife, Susan. We had planned on coming here together, but there was a conflict in the schedule. As it turns out, as we speak, she's in Washington, D.C. being inducted into the Visa and MasterCard Hall of Fame. So she couldn't be here right now. I think I saw some of your wives. Well, John, thanks for that introduction. That was really good. In fact, it was so good, I can't wait to hear what I have to say. I mean, come on. I could have saved you a little time, though. the only thing that I would like for you to know about me is that I'm a soldier for life, I'm a Vietnam veteran, and I'm damn proud of it. I want to talk just a few minutes about the Community Partner Program and the Vietnam War 50th anniversary commemoration. I'm a part of that, and I'm very fortunate to be a part of that. I retired from AUSA in 2013. It was my desire to move to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, the center of the universe, and spend my time being a part-time golfer and a full-time grandpa. But I was offered an opportunity to serve on the team, the Vietnam War commemoration team, and I just couldn't turn it down. So I delayed my departure to Fort Bragg by 1 year. It's a 1 year commitment. And as it turns out, I'm on my 3rd year. So I'm failing retirement 101, but I am very honored to be part of this commemoration. And our mission in life is to thank and honor Vietnam veterans and their family members for their service, valor, and sacrifice. And that's what I do. And I take a great deal of personal pride in being able to do this, to spend time with so many veterans like we have here today. This is what keeps me going and what keeps me off the retirement rolls for good. On Memorial Day 2012, I was invited along with a group of Vietnam veterans to a ceremony in Washington, D.C. at the Vietnam War Memorial. We affectionately refer to this memorial as the Wall. Our nation's leadership was there, Secretary of Defense, Chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Vice President, and the President was a speaker. And what he said that day, I think, bears some, I guess, I'll sort of paraphrase what he said that day, but it was very moving to me to hear what the President had to say. He said that the Vietnam era was one of the most difficult and painful chapters in American history. It was a time when we, as Americans, sometimes blamed the veterans for a war that didn't start. It was a time when we tended to focus on the misdeeds of the few instead of the valor and sacrifice of the many. It was a time when, as our veterans were returning, they were sometimes denigrated when they should have been celebrated for their selfless service to the nation. It was a time that must never be repeated. It was a time that we need to recognize as a mistake, not a perfect nation. But one of our great strengths is that we recognize our mistakes and we take measures to correct it. It's time that we told the story of the Vietnam veterans the right way, the way it should have been told the first time. The story of service, valor, and selfless service and sacrifice to the nation. That's what I do, and I'm very happy to be part of it. And John and all of you are here doing exactly what this commemoration is all about. As I was listening to the President with the wall behind him, I was struck by the fact that our memorial, that wall, is unique. Most memorials, in order to fully appreciate them, you have to be standing some distance away from it to take it all in. Not the case with the Vietnam Wall. To completely understand it, you have to be standing close to it, close enough to touch it, close enough to see the reflection in that dark marble wall, close enough to read those names. Each name on that wall represents a young person who we lost much too soon. A young person that will never know the joy of finding a soulmate to live out their life with, never know the joy of being a parent and a grandparent. Each name on that wall represents the unbelievable pain that a parent must have felt when they were told that the light of their life had been extinguished forever. Each name on that wall, and every man and woman who served in uniform during that period, both before and after, served not for themselves, but for their country. And for that, we owe them a tremendous debt of gratitude. and I'm part of this Vietnam War commemoration, and I gotta tell you, I couldn't be prouder. What I want to do now is show you a short video that we had at the commemoration put together. And then I want to talk to you a little bit about my personal experiences, but I'm not going to stand up here and tell a bunch of war stories. I'm going to just sort of open the discussion with some things that happened to me in Vietnam, and then during the question and answer period, we'll talk about what you want to talk about.
9 million Americans served during the period of the Vietnam War. They represented 10% of their generation. 6 million of them were volunteers. They were the oldest and best educated force America ever sent into harm's way. 97% would be honorably discharged. And today, the vast majority of them testify with their actions and their words that they are proud of their service and would serve again if called. November 14, 1965, 10:48 a.m. Elements of the 7th Cavalry touched down at landing zone X-ray. Within 30 minutes, the Battle of the Ai Drang began, the first major battle fought by the American Army in Vietnam. Over 3 harrowing days, vastly outnumbered American forces were pulled out and ultimately repelled German forces. American forces would never lose a major engagement during the ensuing 8 years of combat operations. Known as the Wall, the Vietnam Memorial stands in honor of those who served in the Vietnam War. The names of the men and women who gave their lives are inscribed in the order they were taken from us. 58,286 names. The youngest was Marine Private First Class Dan Bullock at 15 years of age, and the oldest was Navy Petty Officer First Class Kenna Taylor at 62. There are 3 sets of fathers and sons, 1 set of stepbrothers, 39 pairs of brothers, 8 women, 16 clergy, and 155 Medal of Honor recipients. And let us not forget, there are still more than 1,600 missing and unaccounted for personnel. The French were in Vietnam before the Americans and lost more than 70,000 lives. More than 400,000 Allied troops served with the American forces. Joining as allies with the United States were the Republic of Korea, Thailand, the Republic of the Philippines, Australia, and New Zealand. These allies suffered more than 5,000 lives lost during the course of the war. American combat forces left Vietnam in 1973. 2 years later, Saigon fell. Over those last 2 years, without American and Allied combat forces in the region, casualties in Southeast Asia were double what they had been during the 10 years prior. To our Vietnam veterans who answered the nation's call to serve, we thank you. Your greatness is etched in history from the battlefields of Southeast Asia and the neighborhoods of hometown America, where you continue to bring blessings and inspiration to your families and your country today. To the families of our Vietnam veterans, we thank you for the greatness of your support, sacrifice, vigilance, and compassion. And to our allies who stood by us 50 years ago, we thank you.
1965, I stepped off an aircraft in Saigon onto the soil of South Vietnam. And I was very happy to be there. I joined the Army in 1961. Now, back then, it wasn't a matter of whether or not you were going to go in the military service, it was just a matter of when. Because we had a draft going on, and you were either going to be drafted or you're going to volunteer. If you were drafted, you only had to do 2 years. If you volunteered, you had to do 3 years. But if you waited to be drafted, you didn't know when it was going to come. So if you try to get a job, your employers wouldn't want to do much with you because they knew that you had that draft hanging over your head. If you enlisted for 3 years, at least you knew when your time was up and you could get on with the rest of your life. So I wound up after initial entry training, jump school, as a paratrooper, an airborne infantryman in the 101st Airborne Division, back when it really was an airborne division. And young private, paratrooper, full of whatever, piss and vinegar, I guess I can say that. And my non-commissioned officers, my first line supervisors, all the folks who were in leadership positions over me were Korean War veterans. Many of them were Korean War veterans, and some of them were even World War II and Korean War veterans. And to say that we held them in awe would be an understatement. And I was very young and very impressed by these great Americans, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be just like them. So I decided that I was going to become a professional soldier, an infantryman, a non-commissioned officer, and I did everything I possibly could to become the best non-commissioned officer, best leader that I possibly could. And I knew at the time that the only thing I could never do was to be a combat veteran, to have the combat infantry badge, because we were all convinced that there would be no more wars. The world was safe, there'd be no more wars. Isn't that wonderful and naive? Well, I set about trying to become a great soldier, a good soldier. When my enlistment was up, I re-enlisted, and with the understanding that they would let me go to Ranger School. So when I graduated from Ranger School on the 9th of September, 1965, it should have been one of the happiest days of my life, but I was shocked to see some of my compatriots, some of the folks that served with me coming back from a place called the Dominican Republic, were wearing combat patches and CIBs, and I thought, man, I have had the worst luck in the world. I missed my chance to become a combat infantryman. Well, we had started to hear things about Vietnam, and I was convinced that this was my last chance to get into combat, and I was worried to death that it would be over before I got there. So on the first part of December 1965, when I stepped off that aircraft, I was very happy because I had made it. It was wonderful. And after going through several unpleasant and lengthy processing to get to where I was going to wind up, by the way, I was there as a replacement. You saw in the video about the Battle of Ia Drang Valley. That hit the 1st Cav very heavily. So they took casualties, they needed replacement. I'm one of the first replacements to join the unit to make up for some of those casualties. So I didn't go over with the 1st Cav. I joined them shortly thereafter as a replacement. So I made it all the way to the reception center, and I was eventually assigned to the 1st Cav. We took off from Saigon, headed for Anthem on a C-130 aircraft. And if you're familiar with that part of the world, it's surrounded by mountains, and our C-130 had to sort of corkscrew its way down. They did that to avoid the mountains. Now let's fast forward about 40 years later. I'm in Kuwait visiting Baghdad. We took off from Kuwait, flew on a C-130, and we corkscrewed our way down into that landing zone. As soon as they started that maneuver, flashback to Vietnam. Different time, different circumstances, different war, different part of the country, but it could have been the same C-130 for all I know. Well, I eventually made it to Charlie Company, 2nd 8th, 1st Cav Division, Airborne Air Mobile. Believe it or not, we were on jump status. We had a brigade on jump status. So we made it into the replacements made it into the orderly room. Now our company area was, if you can imagine this, was a sort of a very wide dirt road going up a slight incline. And on each side there was a ditch, and on the other side of the ditches were tents that represented, this is in 65, so pretty primitive. Those tents is where we lived, and supply rooms and all that stuff. And at the very top of the company road was a tent where the company headquarters was. So we reported to the first sergeant, and what I expected to get from the first sergeant was my assignment to what platoon, what position I was going to hold, and some words of wisdom. Well, I got the assignment. I was 11 Charlie, so I was going to the weapons platoon. The words of wisdom didn't come unless you consider, now get the hell out of my orderly room as words of wisdom. That's the kind of instructions that I got. I reported to the platoon sergeant in the weapons platoon. We called him chief. He wanted to be called chief. He was a sergeant first class. I don't know what his real name was, but he was obviously of American Indian descent, Native American descent, and he wanted to be called chief, so we called him chief. He took one look at me and he saw my Ranger tab and my rank. He handed me a radio and he said, "You are now a forward observer for the 2nd platoon." So I went traveling down to the 2nd platoon. And despite the fact that I was on paper a member of the mortar platoon, the weapons platoon, I spent all my time in the 2nd platoon, and I bonded with the non-commissioned officers and the soldiers in that unit. Our very first combat operation was to move out to a village and try to determine whether or not they were on our side or whether they were sympathetic to the VC. So we were told in a briefing that this village, a probably very remote village, and if they'd ever seen a Westerner, it would have been the French some years ago. So we didn't know anything about them. They probably didn't know anything about us. But we prepared to take on this mission. We put our gear on, weapons, ammunition, and I was issued handfuls of candy. In fact, I had candy in both pockets. Everywhere I could stick candy, I had candy. Something called, I think they call it sweet tarts. Can't remember exactly, but it was stuff you put in your mouth and it fizzed. I didn't like it. First time I'd ever seen it. But I had all this candy. And the idea was that if we go to this village and they're friendly, we give this candy to the children. If they welcome us with open arms. If they don't, then they must be hostile. If we meet resistance and we do what instrument do, we overcome the obstacle. So we take off from Anke, fly out to this village. It's just getting daylight. And as we're circling the village, you look down and it's just very picturesque. It looks like a picture out of the National Geographic. You know, the little grass huts and nothing moving, surrounded by rice paddies. You can see the water buffalo out, and it just looks absolutely like it's like a painting. Well, as was our routine, the area that we had designated as a landing zone, artillery preparation went in. Okay, so they're prepping the DZ with artillery, and as you can imagine, the folks in that village must have thought that the world was coming to an end. So before we landed, they all ran. And by our logic, they were VC. They must be bad guys because they ran. Well, the only good thing that came out of that is I got to keep the candy. Although I did trade the sweet tarts for Tootsie Rolls. We didn't stay very long. We started moving out on a combat operation. And as a veteran, I'm sure you know, when you move through the jungle, you move in a single file. You can't move on line, it's just too thick, so you just move in a single file. And the first person in line is called the point man, and he blazes a trail, and he just muscles his way through it. We don't use machetes or any of that kind of stuff. The second person sort of enlarges it, and so on and so forth, and that's the way you move through the jungle. Well, I was in the second platoon. On the right was the third platoon, on the left was the first platoon, but they were so far away, and the vegetation was so thick that you didn't know that they were there. You knew that they were there, but you couldn't see them and you couldn't hear them. Well, as we're moving along, somebody about, I'm about the middle of the formation, somebody about 2 or 3 people in front of me had their M16 caught in the jungle and the vines, and he yanked it real hard, and the weapon fired. And the round went past about 4 or 5 people and hit a soldier in the back. About an inch below his flak jacket. Now, we wore flak jackets back then, and they were large, heavy, bulky, and we eventually got rid of them while we were on the move because we had more heat casualties than we had casualties from combat operations. So this soldier was in need of immediate evacuation, and there we are in the jungle, and we dropped everything and started hacking our way, hacking out an area in that jungle large enough to get a helicopter in. Now, we didn't have machetes. We used knives, and bayonets, and a couple of people had entrenching tools, but it took forever to chop up an area large enough to get a helicopter in to evacuate this soldier. We kept him alive long enough to put him on the helicopter, but he died en route to the hospital. Well, I'd only been there for about 2 weeks, maybe a little bit longer, and I was not quite acclimated to the heat and humidity. So I was completely exhausted, covered with sweat, and once we got the helicopter off, the word came to saddle up and let's move out again. We only got about 10 meters, I guess, before we were told to stop. Because one of the other platoons, when they stopped, waiting for us to hack out this LZ, they took off their gear, somebody sit on his gear, and when the word came to move out, he put the gear back on, and a hand grenade that was hanging from his web gear fell off and went off, and they had casualties. I don't know how many, but they were now in need of medical attention, and it was their turn to hack out a landing zone while we sit and waited for them. I had only been in country for about a little over 2 weeks. This was the first day of my first combat operation. I had about 11 and a half months left to go, and I'm saying to myself, how the heck am I going to make it through this 11 months? Now, let's go back 2 weeks earlier when I told you that I was happy to be there. I was no longer happy to be there. Well, I'm not gonna sit up here and tell you a whole bunch of war stories, although probably I'd like to. So what I want to do is just ask you to ask me questions. What we went through in Vietnam, as all the Vietnam veterans, all our veterans here know, was very difficult in a very difficult part of the world. I joined a unit that went over as a unit. They were trained. They trained and bonded before they came to Vietnam. They served as a unit with their unit leadership. They had faith in their leadership. And I was a replacement. I fit in pretty well, pretty quickly. But about 7, maybe 8 months later, they all left. And we had a wave of individual replacements. And that was, in my opinion, a very serious mistake. And one of the lessons learned from Vietnam is not to do that again. You know that units that are deployed now to these wars go over as a unit. They train together, they fight together, they return together. And that's, I think, is part of the Vietnam legacy. I told you that the veterans were sometimes blamed for a war they didn't start. That's because then we seemed to be unable to separate the war from the warrior. That's no longer the case. It is not unusual to see a citizen walk up to a soldier in uniform and thank them for their service, or a veteran who has some way of identifying himself and thank them for their service. If you walk through the airport, it's not unusual to see groups of soldiers being applauded. I fly American Airlines a lot, and sometimes people in first class will give up their seats to soldiers in uniform. it's very heartwarming to see this. And I would tell you that if you look closely at the people who are applauding, if you look closely at the people who are the first ones to shake their hands and welcome them home, you'll see Vietnam veterans. That's part of our legacy as well, because we are determined that the soldiers, the young men and women who serve today will not be treated the way we were treated when we returned. Never again will one generation of veterans turn their back on another. So that's part of our legacy. And with that, I will open it up to questions. Oh, by the way, I would ask that you, if you ask me a question, don't ask me political questions because I don't know anything about politics. Okay? I don't, whether it was right or wrong to be there, we'll leave that up to the historians. I'm not going to get into that. And I would ask that if you ask me a question, formulate it in such a way as I can answer true or false or yes or no, okay? I don't like essay questions.
Make big comments. We have members of the Air Force Association with microphones. If you have a question, raise your hand. Dick is over there. We got a gentleman in the middle. It's much easier for all of us to hear your question if we do it by microphone. So, first question.
Well, let me answer the first question. When he said I joined the Army at 61, that was in fact 1961, not 1861. Okay, let's get that question out of the way right off the bat. Okay.
What's your impression of the draftees that you served?
Well, very good question. Thank you very much. I was in an airborne unit, 101st Airborne Division, and I was in an airborne unit, the 1st Cav, until they dropped the airborne designation. So the draftees that I served with for about the first 4 years of service were draftees who had volunteered to go to jump school. Okay, they were airborne, they were paratroopers, so they were not typical of what of the draftees of today. But as the 1st Cav initial group ended their service, their 1 year, and they were replaced, we had sort of a wide spectrum, a wide personality types. Most of them, there were some very good ones, very high caliber folks. It was not unusual to see a private drafted in the Army with college education, some even graduate degrees, and you had some who could barely read and write. So you had the spectrum. If I was going to characterize those folks, it would be that they would do exactly what they had to do to stay out of trouble, and nothing more. That would be the norm. And for those of you who think that we ought to bring back the draft, I would tell you that if you're the coach of the University of Alabama football team, and you want to build a championship team, you're not going to draft people on your team. You're going to want people who want to be there, who share your vision, who want to work hard and accomplish big things. And you can't do that with folks who are there under duress. Now, that's not to say that they were bad folks. It's just that we interrupted their lives. We sent them off in a very dangerous place. And, some of them were very good, some of them were not very good. I can tell you that on the low end of the deal, we had folks who would do almost anything to stay out of the jungle, to include shooting themselves in the foot. But this was a very small minority. But it was hard to build teams. It's hard to take training and teamwork to the next level when you have folks like that. It only takes one, and you're not going to get very far. Today, in the draft army, I got to tell you, I was not in favor of the draft army. I thought it was a mistake. I was wrong. Everything about the draft, everything about the army today is positive, except, and I was worried about this, the soldiers, the army is becoming a more and more isolated subset of American culture. Back during the draft, everybody went through some military service. There was a connection there. Now, most Americans don't have a clue. And I guess that's okay. But we have less than 1% who are willing to step forward, put on the uniform, and defend our country. So that's the only bad part. And I guarantee you, the things that we're doing with our teams, our units, our organizations today, we're filled with volunteers who couldn't do with draftees. That's my personal opinion, nothing scientific about it. But thank you for that question. I hope that answers. Okay, sir.
Secretary McNamara helped us out a lot, giving us 100,000.
100,000.
Category 4.
Yes.
Soldiers who impacted a lot of impressions on leaders who had to deal with those soldiers.
Yeah, that's true. McNamara's 100,000. They were, and I got to tell you, one of the things that bothered me about that program, it's sort of off center here, is we brought them in for 2 years. We trained them to whatever extent we could train them. We used them for a year in Vietnam. We brought them back and we wouldn't let them re-enlist. And I thought that was, I wasn't happy with that, but I wasn't in much position to do anything about it. But under normal circumstances, they would not have met the criteria to come in. We brought them in as an experiment. But the only thing I didn't like about it is we did not allow them to stay in. Now there were some exceptions. I know some guys who fell in that category who made it, who actually went on to have pretty good careers. But it was an experiment, and didn't work out very well, if you ask me. Now we got a briefing. If you were here when we talked about NCO education and officer education. When I left Vietnam, we had PFCs as squad leaders because there was a tremendous shortage of non-commissioned officers. And the Army's reaction to this was to create this NCO shake and bakes. I had a problem with it, not because we didn't have great young Americans doing it, energetic, intelligent, but by my way of thinking, we should have made that PFC in Vietnam, who was running a platoon, a squad, or a fire team, should have made that person a non-commissioned officer, and not try to make leaders out of soldiers who were in basic training and advanced individual training. Because I got to tell you, no matter how smart you are, no matter how much training you have, it still takes 1 year to get 1 year's worth of experience. And that's where we fell down, I think, from that project. Now, but I got to tell you, I know some very successful people who went through the Shake and Bake program. But for the most part, personally, I thought it was the wrong approach to the problem. Yes, sir.
When you got to your command post, did they take you the rules of combat?
You mean rules of engagement?
Yes, when you encountered the enemy.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I was there early in the war, and that didn't become a huge issue until much later, probably 67, 68, as you got all these individual replacements coming in. And there were a ton of lessons that we learned through that first year there with the units that went over that were lost with the folks who came in as replacements. I can remember we had CS grenades. Okay, that's gas, tear gas. I mean, it wasn't lethal. But if you were in a cave or someplace like that, a bunker, and you throw it in, it causes you to come out. Well, we had to go all the way back to division and get permission to use a CS grenade to throw into a bunker or a cave to flush somebody out. I didn't think that was very helpful. But you know, being much older and wiser now, maybe it was okay because we were capable of doing some pretty dumb things with our young draftees who didn't bond with their leadership and had different values and you needed some way to control them. Yes, sir.
We couldn't fire unless, they told us, we couldn't fire unless fired upon.
No one told us that. Obviously, if you're fired on, you're gonna react immediately. And if we come across a clearly identified VC or North Vietnamese unit, we're gonna take them under fire. That's all we did. We spent more time in the jungle than we did back at camp, base camp. It was our typical routine to spend about 10 days, maybe longer, out in the jungle, come back to base camp, refit, get cleaned up, replace whatever equipment was malfunctioning, and get a chance to sleep through the night without somebody standing guard. But when we were out there for a purpose. We would air mobile into an area. We would go through the jungle looking for some specific target, and when we found it, we opened up on it. Okay, and somebody there was some sensitivity to villages. If you take fire from a village, the tendency is to open fire with everything you got back into the village, and you have to use some common sense when it comes to that particular scenario. And I can see where that kind of instruction would be important at that point. But I got to tell you, under the stress of combat, we did some things that we probably shouldn't have done because of it, and because of that, those sorts of rules were probably put in place. But if we recognize a clear threat, a clear enemy target, we would take it under fire. And most of what we did, my personal experiences, and you may have some different experiences. I was never really engaged in anything that you see in the movies of World War II in Korea. Most of our engagements were firefights, where we would come upon the enemy. We would it'd be a pretty intense firefight for, sometimes we lasted a matter of minutes, sometimes we lasted for hours. But that's the way we fought this war. There were no Normandy invasions and that sort of thing. We took a lot of casualties. We had a lot of folks who were wounded and killed. Our medics, if you're an infantryman who's been in combat, there are a couple of folks that you grow to love. Army nurses, angels, those magnificent men and those flying machines are your lifeline that bring you food and ammunition, that take you in and out of combat situations, and provide with much needed firepower when you're being overwhelmed. And the medics are right there with you. And when something happens and everybody is down, everybody's trying to get behind something to protect them, the medics are out there bringing in the wounded. I was going to be a medic. I had applied, but I was missing two ingredients. One of them I wasn't smart enough. The other one I wasn't brave enough. So I had to stay an infantryman. Yes, sir.
You said you were an MK-65.
Yes.
Well, sir, I'm one of those guys that processed you into the hellhole. I'm glad I didn't have to process you as a KIA, but I also made sure that your payroll was up to date.
Absolutely. As an infantryman, before I went to Vietnam, I was sort of cocky. We're the only reason the rest of you exist. But I very quickly understood that we can't do this without each other. This is all one team, one fight, and no one on that team, no matter where you are and what you're doing, is unimportant. Like I say, there are some people that there's some organizations and some individual military occupation specialists that I have a great deal of respect for. Speaking of processing, I was once the Army Personnel Command Sergeant Major. It is now called HRC. And I'm living in Korea as a combined drill Army Sergeant Major. I've been a combat guy all my life, combat infantry guy, Ranger Special Forces, and I was told that I was selected to be the first comm Sergeant Major, so go figure. So I flew to Washington D.C. and we were stationed in, we're located in the Hoffman Building in Arlington, Virginia, Alexandria, Virginia. And I couldn't believe it. Here we are. Here I am, an infantryman, you know, with all these personnel guys. And I was only there for about a year, and I was selected to be the U.S. Army Special Operations Command Sergeant Major. But I went in, you know, with eyes like this, scared to death. I don't know anything that's going on in here, but after about a year there, I discovered just how important the Army Personnel Command was. And I really felt good about the fact that I would attend some of these meetings as a soldier, and I don't know, the voice of reason, I guess, would be the right word. So I began to see the beauty of having the rationale of having an infantry soldier there amongst all of those folks who need that kind of input, because sometimes what looks good on briefing charts really doesn't work too well in the field. So I was able to influence some of that, but it was a wonderful experience for me. And by the time I left, I was actually sort of sad to leave because I understood how important that part of the team was to our Army. Yes, sir.
Could you comment on the media, its impact on your unit? Could you comment on the media, its impact on the unit, fight the war?
I'll tell you, it evolved. In December of 1965, everybody was in favor of the war, didn't know much about it. There wasn't a lot of war protesting going on. By the time I went back to my second tour as an advisor, things had taken a bad turn. And when I told you the president said that we tended to focus on the misdeeds of the few instead of the valor of the many, by this time the media had an agenda. They were not in favor of the war. And as a result, all the bad things that happened to the soldiers and to the veterans and the family was I think, fueled by the media's attitude. And I don't want to really get into that, but and just let me tell you, and maybe I should have told you this up front, I was part of a team. I was in the Army. I was in the Army before Vietnam. I was never alone. I was surrounded by soldiers at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. When I went to Vietnam, I was surrounded by soldiers in the 1st Cav Division. When I came back to the 82nd Airborne Division, I was surrounded by soldiers. And I was not exposed to some of the things that our draftees were exposed to when they drafted in the Army, spent a year in Vietnam, came back, and were released back into their hometowns. They're the ones who were spit on. They're the ones who suffered the consequences of our changing attitudes about our war in Vietnam. I can tell you that I worked for people who were very senior, who hated the media, talking about military folks, and some that understood, you know, the media. It was better to try to help shape the story as opposed to just criticizing the story. But that's as far as I want to go because I'm a product of all that. Yes, sir. Now this is the command sergeant major on one side and the chaplain on the other. So on the command sergeant major side, he's the one that makes them cry, and on the chaplain side, he's the one that says it'll be okay, son.
Did you replace Joe Hamlet?
I did. Joe Hamlet, absolutely. Joe Hamlet was there for about 7 or 8 years. He was a legend, and here I come as an infantryman trying to replace a legend. But what I did do is I cured him of the habit of bringing combat infantrymen guys in to be the first comm sergeant. I don't think they did it after that.
Well, I'm the chaplain for Vietnam Veterans of America, Chapter 1067. and about 70 to 80% of our members have some of those diseases the other chaplain talked about, PTSD, Agent Orange, and all those kinds of things. But I just want to make a statement and make a take on this. There's nothing wrong with you not having the problems with Vietnam. You know, I talked to a lot of guys in my chapter, and they said, "Boy, I feel awful. There's nothing wrong with me." You know, you're blessed that there's nothing wrong with me. All we got to do now is help other people that have things wrong with them. And I just happen to be one of them. I served in the 1st Aviation Brigade, so a lot of things, but I'm blessed. There's nothing wrong with me. I hope. I'm 73 years old, so maybe I can survive the rest of it. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know whether I had the effects of PTSD because I was surrounded by soldiers. We all went through the same experiences, and we were all sort of crazy to begin with. So I don't know. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But I can tell you that I think I want to be careful how I say this, okay? Because I don't want to offend anybody or get myself in trouble. But the point you made about coming back from combat and not being disabled is important. And as I watch television and I see these wounded warriors and the folks who were put on television telling us about their stories, about them being changed forever, unable to function properly, needing a great deal of care, my heart goes out to them. But they are sending a message that we're damaged. We're sending a message that if you are a prospective employer, that you're willing to write a check to help these kids, but you're not so willing to give them a job because they have baggage. And I think it's important for us to get the message out that we're not all damaged to the point where we can't function, where we can't succeed, where we can't lead, where we can't be a productive member of society. I don't know what to do about that. But every time I see one of these commercials, programs, or whatever they are, it really bothers me. So I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you. Yes, sir.
But the other thing I get concerned about is there's a feel on your guilt thing. You have people that really need help, but they go down to the VA and they see these young people that are far worse in their mind than they are. And so they kind of turn away and they say, I'm not going to get the help because these ones really need it because they're worse off than I am. This is like your comment on the fact that I find that to be an issue with some people that I know.
Yeah, I agree, and I think one of the problems is as soldiers, we have this self-image about ourselves, and seeking help, just like seeking directions when you're lost, seems to be unmanly, and it's a problem. And I know that the Army leadership has done a lot to try to overcome that, but it's an uphill battle. I think one of the things that we can do is things just like this. Is we can get our veterans into places like this and let them tell their story. Let them be exposed to others who've had similar experiences and talk among themselves. That's what the VFW is doing. That's what the BVA is doing. That's what AUSA is doing. And we need to do a lot of that because you have those who are on the margin that are not in the category of not being able to function, but haven't reached the point where they feel like they need to go somewhere and ask somebody for help. Our chaplains, our churches, our social programs, and all of our veterans organizations needs to make an effort to get these folks together and let them vent and somehow get some measure of closure to what they've gone through. As a member of this commemoration, I have spent a lot of time going around the country thanking and honoring Vietnam veterans. And I got to tell you, when you stand in front of someone who's big, strong, healthy Vietnam veteran, looking at you sideways, looking down at you sideways, and I give them a lapel pin, I thank them for their service on behalf of the grateful nation. It's not unusual to have them tear up, because in some cases, this is the first time anyone has ever thanked them for their service. I am just as affected by that as they are, and that's why I'm honored to be a part of this program.
Thank you, Sergeant Major. I know there's more questions out there, but we also have food back there that's waiting for you. I'd like to invite Jim Rogers to come up, please. Sergeant Major, excellent comments. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Major General Rogers is presenting our guest speaker with a special 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War coin. Thank you. Folks, we're almost ready to wrap up. Immediately following closing comments, I'm going to say Command Sergeant Major Spencer will be available right in front of the podium for photo ops. And also, if you want to commemorate Department of Coin, the table, not coin, pin, lapel pin. Lapel pins are over there on that side. You can go over there and have him personally pin you. We're nearing the end of the program. For those, well, let me say, I just covered that. 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War Lecture Series. Our next one is scheduled a year from now, November 2017. Please check the website for dates. Chaplain Henderson, would you provide us with a closing prayer?
Thank you, John. May we pray. May we ask the Lord's blessings before we depart. Father, thank you for this special time together as we've remembered and honored those who served honorably in Vietnam. Lord, we pray your blessings upon each and upon their families. Help us to remember all of them. Thank you for everyone present today, for all who made this special event possible. God bless our great nation, all who serve and have served our great nation. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, hold fast. Liz Knudsen, if you could join me up here at the podium. Vietnam Veterans of America Volunteer of the Year Award. We have our president given to Elizabeth Knudsen. Where's our photo? Ladies and gentlemen, that does wrap it up. Please join us for a retro 1970 luncheon back there. Please continue to enjoy our exhibits. And don't forget, Sergeant Major Spencer will be over here at the American Partner booth to get your pin. This concludes our program.